I'll be buried in my grave before I become a slave, yeah. That is what I heard them say way back in the day. I'll be buried in my grave before I become a slave, yeah, yeah. But it seems like since that day, yeah, we have sorely changed. I'll be buried in my grave before I become a slave, yeah, yeah. That is what I heard them say, yeah. Way back in the day. I'll be buried in my grave, yeah, before I become a slave, yeah, yeah, yeah. But it seems like since that day, yeah, we have sorely changed. Whoa. Hey, hey. Whoa, oh, 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 oh. Whoa, oh, 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 oh.
And now, live from beautiful Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, you're watching My Fellow Americans with your host, Spike Cohen.
Yes! Yes, 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 it's me. Thank you so much. Thank you. Keep clapping. Clap for the election night miracle. How would we know that you wanted the election night miracle if you didn't keep clapping? Welcome to My Fellow Americans. I am literally Spike Cohen. I'd like to thank you for joining us on this special night. It is a special night. This is the night before I head off. Well, yes, it's also Halloween, but more importantly, it's also the night before I head off for my final event of the year. My final event of the year, which is going to, well, actually, I guess it's my final rally of the year, which will be in Columbia, South Carolina, tomorrow starting at 2 at the State House, at the State House there in beautiful Columbia, South Carolina, from 2 to 5. And then on Tuesday, I'll probably be going live a few times during the election night party. We'll be having an election night party in Dallas, the Jorgensen Cohen election watch party. So be sure to tune in for that. And be sure to share this video right now. Be sure to share this video everywhere you can go. Facebook, surprisingly enough, is suppressing libertarian programming, including this wonderful program that you're about to watch. This is a Muddied Waters Media production. Check us out on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Anchor, Twitter, Periscope, iTunes, Google Play, Float, Twitch, Discord. Check us out everywhere. The internet, check us out everywhere. Be sure to like us and follow us and 5-star us. And if you're checking us out on YouTube, be sure to hit that bell to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Of anything coming from Muddy Waters Media. And be sure to share this again. Share this right this very second. The last thing that we want is for you or your closest loved ones to miss out on a roughly hour-long libertarian podcast. That would be a terrible thing for you and everyone else involved, and us as well. Be sure to give the gift of Spike Cohen today. Kids love it. This episode, of course, is brought to you by the Libertarian Dad Bod Calendar, featuring some of the sexiest libertarian men to ever be libertarian and male at the same time, including yours truly right here, Mr. April. You can get these at libertariandadbod.com for $12, including shipping, or you can get a signed one today for $30, including shipping. All proceeds go to libertarian candidates. Most recently, they have been going to Joe and myself, our campaign. This episode is also brought to you by the Libertarian Party Waffle House Caucus, the fastest growing liberty-related, waffle-related liberty caucus ever. There's no way that there's another caucus related to waffles and liberty that's ever done as well as us. So shout out to us. Be sure to join us on Facebook at the Facebook group called Libertarian Party Waffle House Caucus. This episode is also brought to you by Black Coffee, spelled BLVCK, because nothing matters anymore. We can spell things however the hell we want. And you can get your delicious cold brew black organic coffee, the most delicious coffee to ever be misspelled, by going to blackbrewsblvckbrews.com. Be sure to use the checkout code MW for free shipping. This episode is also brought to you by the Jorgensen Cohen 2020 campaign. Joe and I are running on on a platform of nothing less than setting America free in our time, and we are honored for all the help that we have received along the way. People supporting us across the country. We have been honored to experience that. And of course, this episode is brought to you by personal injury attorney Chris Reynolds, attorney at law. If you are injured personally in, I believe, just the Tampa Bay area of Florida, I always forget if he does all of Florida or just Tampa Bay, go to chrisreynoldslaw.com. He will get you money. That's what lawyers do. I should probably work on that. What else? Oh, the intro and outro music to this and every single episode of My Fellow Americans is done by the amazing and talented Mr. Joe Davi. That's Jodavi. Check him out on Facebook. Check him out on SoundCloud. Check him out on his Bandcamp. Go to jodavimusic.bandcamp.com. Buy his entire discography. It's like 20-something bucks. You'll get a bunch of songs in there. You will love it. He is an incredibly talented musician and a dear friend, and I love his music, and I'm honored to have him on my show, his music on my show. This episode is also brought to you by Aquafina water, right? Aquafina, yeah. The water that I got at the airport yesterday. Shout out to Aquafina. Bula Vinaka. Drink this. I actually haven't had water in a while. Shout out to Tehran Turks and Mominum as always, guys. Like I was saying, this is election night. Election night. Or no, this is the election for the pre-election party. Election night is on Tuesday. And we're going to have a fantastic time in Dallas, seeing how well the Libertarian Party does. I believe that we will do better than any previous candidate has. And I believe that we will have more Libertarians elected across the country than ever before. Right now, the number is around 230, and I think that I think we're going to surpass that number. I think that there are some people that are going to get elected, such as Donald Rainwater, who looks like increasingly like he's going to win his gubernatorial race in Indiana, and also for Ricky Harrington is another one who I think is going to win his Senate seat in Arkansas. They will both be the first Libertarian to be elected for governor and for senator, respectively. I think that Brad Barron is doing a fantastic job in Kentucky running in his race. There's so many people running across the country for governor and Senate and Congress and all sorts of other races. I think we're going to have a really good showing. Joe and I, of course, are running to win the White House. We know what odds we face in doing so. We know the blackout that we've experienced. We saw how, with those debates, we saw exactly why the media does everything they can to try to ignore us. But we think that we're going to do better than any campaign's ever done before in the Libertarian Party. And we think we're going to set the stage for even better in the future. So with that said, a couple house cleaning items before we get started with the Q&A. Actually, a couple things. First, again, I will be in Columbia, South Carolina, tomorrow at the State House for my final rally, my victory rally in South Carolina from 2 to 5. I'd love to have you come out. Love to be able to take your questions. That's really what I do most of the time. I give a short speech. We have some local down ballot candidates talk as well. But I like to do Q&A like I do here. My favorite thing to do is answer questions from libertarians, because we have to, we have to answer these questions. These are, difficult questions. We're running to be in charge of the executive branch of the government, and we need to be able to have answers for the questions that everyday folks like you have. So that's what I'll be doing in Columbia. So I'd love to see you out there if you're anywhere near Columbia, South Carolina. And then on Tuesday, we will be in Dallas. Before we get started with the Q&A, I want to show you something. If you have been following my social media, then you have probably seen the videos from one Dan Smoldt, who is incredibly talented, and he actually joined me on the last leg of my bus tour and did a 5-part series documenting my 5 days across the U.S. And I'm not going to show all of them because they were all around 10 to 15 minutes long, so it would be like an hour-long episode just showing those videos. But I do want to show you. I do want to show you I do want to show you this video from Miami, and this was our final stop on the bus tour, my final stop on the bus tour. And the long story short, the intro to this video is that we were supposed to have an indoor event in Miami. We were going to, follow all the rules in Miami because unlike the rest of Florida, Miami is still pretty much locked down. And we were going to have an indoor event. And then the city decided to shut us down. And we're not sure if that's because they wanted to shut us out and because Trump and Biden were both in Miami at that time doing their dueling town halls, or if it was, for another corrupt reason. Whatever reason it was, it came out of nowhere. And I'm just going to let the video go because it explains just how stupid this whole thing was. It also shows how we responded. And spoiler alert, we didn't back down. So this is Roberto. He's the owner of Cubo Ocho, which is where we were supposed to have our event on Calle Ocho.
Mira. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
7 police cars came to cite him for COVID restrictions, even though he was in the location by himself. He's about to show you that.
Yo solo, tranquilo, con un amigo. Un ticket, aquí está. El city manager, el alcalde y no sé qué, y toda la policía le dice, le echa la culpa al alcalde. Dice que es el alcalde y otro alcalde. Ahora, yo que llevo 7 meses cerrado, sin pagar mi renta, sin poder pagar mis biles, y muriéndome de hambre, y vienen a ponerme una multa por fumarme un tabaco tranquilo y solo en mi negocio. Esto es tremendísimo abuso.
Right now, I want you to know that all of you are the foundation upon which the movement for human liberty is built, and the very engine that drives it. You are the power.
Go back and watch the rest of these. They're amazing. There are 5 of them. This is the last one. Don't go back now. Keep watching the show. You're talking about an armed invasion of a building that is secured by the Secret Service. This is a whole thing that you're proposing what would start a small war in whatever city you're choosing. Cleveland would become a battleground and a lot of people would die. And I still wouldn't end up on the debate stage, nor would Joe. We'd probably end up dead. This is like the most fake looking photo. We're not just another party. We're not just a lesser of 3 evils instead of 2 evils. We're not just a new set of politicians to vote for. We're a completely different way of looking at things. We're a completely different way of looking at how government should interact with people.
We're supposed to be hosting a rally and a salsa dance tonight in Old Havana. Trump and Biden are both in town. They're hosting town halls and they get to do what they want. But the police, the Gestapo, have shut down the 1 block where we're supposed to be hosting our rally this evening. And they specifically targeted the 5 clubs on the block where we're supposed to be at today and have shut them down for 24 hours. From 12 o'clock afternoon today to 12 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, just conveniently while we're supposed to be
This is
there.
Anthony Welty, my advanced planner.
Downtown, they opened up this weekend for the first time, so I'm surprised to hear that they're shutting down 8th Street for a little while, actually.
The unfortunate thing is the business was looking forward to having us there.
Yeah, of course.
They're starving.
Yeah.
Belief of the people who have organized it is that one of the people who we tried to get a bid from to host our events and who presented an absolutely absurd price tag, his was the only establishment that wasn't shut down last night of all the ones that we reached out to. All the other ones were.
As you can see, closed. I just watched them issue tickets to somebody around the corner for a noise variance.
So they're just being
They're just, and yeah, they're kicking everybody out.
This is because Trump and Biden are here.
Probably. Yeah.
All right, let's do some resolution shit. Here we go.
Ready to go. You ready? Calle Ocho! Who's ready for a revolution? Who here is sick and tired of living under a government that presumes the authority to tell you whether or not you're essential? Who here is sick and tired of being told whether or not you should be able to go outside, whether or not you should be able to operate your business like what they're putting Roberto through, whether or not you should be able to work to provide for your families, whether or not you should be able to return to something normal because of an imposed lockdown that even the World Health Organization has said has failed to do anything other than make your lives more difficult? Who here is ready to take back the power?
There's a crisis, and the crisis oftentimes is propagated by government.
This is what happens when you start winning. First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win. This is fighting us. This is the first step to winning. Who here is ready to take every bit of the power and the freedom and the wealth that they stole from you back and put it back in your hands where it always damn well belonged?
I'm Joe Jorgensen, and I approve this message.
So both of my sources of income have been completely destroyed. What do I get in return? A stimulus check made out of fake money. I don't want that. I do not want that.
About $16,000 to $17,000 they stole from you with the stroke of a pen. You got $1,200 of that. The rest of that, the other $15,000, $16,000 that went out, that went to big crony corporations that bought and paid for the politicians who signed off on that thing, including the president, and it went to big government agencies at the federal and state levels. And what did they do with that money? They enforced things even worse on you. They made sure that you couldn't go out and make a living. They made sure that Roberto couldn't open his business. He fled Cuba with the caravans that came here in the 1980s to escape tyranny in Cuba. How horrific is it that a man who had to suffer under a dictatorship has been told for the last 7 months that he's not allowed to open his business? How insane is it that someone who escaped here to get away from a dictatorship and to get to the American dream was fined and told to shut down by 7 police cruisers who showed up because he was in his own bar with no one else there, not wearing a mask? That is a government that presumes the authority to control every single aspect of your life.
It's beyond Republican and Democrat. It's the power. It's the power that they have, that the government has, that they're using over us. And it's time to stop.
We are fighting for the recognition that you do best when you are most free, that you know better than these idiots who often haven't even run a real job or run a real business in their whole lives. That you know better than these people that are under direction of multi-billionaire cronies who have a vested interest in making your life more difficult. We've been living under a soft version of the purge for months now. And now the WHO is finally admitting to that. So I guess now they'll get to be told that they hate people's grandparents and that they're anti-science. Because that's what we've been hearing for months. Well, we've been saying that this virus should be taken seriously, that we should take appropriate countermeasures to keep ourselves and our loved ones safe, but that you can't shut down everything. You can't destroy everyone's life in order to save it. Libertarians believe that when people try to harm each other or tell them how to live or try to take from them, that that's an act of aggression. We recognize that as being not only wrong from a moral standpoint, that you shouldn't rob people and take their stuff. It doesn't work. If I can rob all of you whenever I see fit, if I can order you around whenever I want to, there is absolutely no reason for me to give you any value. We are running for nothing less than a world set free, an America set free, an America with its chains removed in our time. And let's be clear, our time is now. So one of the biggest misconceptions about the Libertarian Party is that we don't care about others. Just the opposite is true. We want to help others. I have been involved in libertarian campaigns where we've actually gone and illegally fed homeless people and dared the police to come and arrest us. We want people to get the help they need, and we recognize that this government is simply creating need and not actually helping people. This model has failed us.
Okay, cool. No, I don't disagree with you. It's just that we've got to.
So in order to make sure that Roberto, because the police were literally across the street the whole time this was happening, we actually had to keep our masks on so we didn't get Roberto, like, have him lose his license.
Here's what you're hearing in the background. You are hearing a man whose life is being destroyed by government. He came here from Cuba to escape tyranny, and for the last 7 months he has been told by the Miami government that he can't operate his business. He's losing everything. He has spent, I don't know how many years and decades he has spent putting this business together.
He's an institution.
He has created an institution.
He is an institution here in Miami.
And it's being destroyed by people who don't care. They would just as soon he be relying on them for his basic needs. They don't care that they're ruining his livelihood, everything he has worked to build. They don't care. He is now facing the very thing that he fled to get away from 40 years ago. And this is what you're hearing. This is what we're trying to fight against. This is what we're trying to end. This is the exasperation of a man who's been fighting for decades and is losing everything because someone wrote on a sheet of paper that he's not allowed to be able to work.
Right. Or be open for the public.
Yeah, for their safety. Even though we can be in here with masks in a safe way, socially distancing, harming no one, and instead they tell them, no, you just have to go out of business. Yeah. And if you lose everything, that's fine. We're fighting for people like you. This needs to end.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. I am sorry, Luciano. We're going to end this, okay? Thank you. Have a good night. Thank you, sir. Have a good night. Ready? Yep. Let's go. Everybody, here we go. Okay. I'm Spike Cohen, and you are the Rally!
So that was how it went in. That was how it went in Miami. And like I said, if you haven't seen all of those, be sure to go to the on my Facebook page or on my Twitter or on my YouTube and check out the rest of those. He did one for Birmingham, Alabama, Savannah, Georgia, Jacksonville, Florida, and Orlando, Florida, and then that one you just saw in Miami. Dan Smoldt is an incredibly talented person, and it was great to have him on the bus for those 5 days that he was there. So with that said, I'm now going to
I'm going to open things up to the questions here for anyone who would like to ask a question. I'm going to go back and see if there's any questions here. And if you have any questions, feel free to put them in whatever you're using to chat. And I will get to as many as I can. I certainly can't get to all of them. Oh, shout out to David. Hey, thanks for joining us. Dadman from Liberty Memes is here. By the way, check out, if you want to help people around you, or really anywhere, and when you often, especially when you're told, well, what are we going to do without government to help us? There's actually many libertarians answering that question. We will help people, and there will be far fewer people that need help in the first place when we get government off their backs. But there is a group on Facebook called the Liberty Memes $5 Club, right? Liberty Memes $5 charity club. And I invite you to join it. All they ask you to do is donate at least $5 every month to one of the causes that they put forward. You will not have a shortage of causes to be able to help. So far, they've helped almost 70 different causes, raised something like almost $500,000. And they've done this in a matter of a couple months' time. So be sure to join that Liberty Memes $5 charity club. Be sure to join that. Let's see who we have here with questions. Let's get some good questions here. Alex Boyer says, Joe Biden says he will mobilize Truiner Nash Havdipzer. What are my thoughts on this? I am definitely against whatever that is. Whatever that is, we do not want to mobilize that. Let's see what else here. In fact, David's saying, today's cause in Liberty Memes $5 charity club is an autistic girl who routinely leaves the yard and ends up in dangerous situations. The family lives on high alert when she's awake. I can't imagine the torture. We are raising funds to help them upgrade their security system and fences in their yards so that they know when she tries to get out. We found this cause because the father commented on my post about the group. That's awesome. Well, that's a perfect example of how we can help each other. So thank you for sharing that. Eddie Bohm says, I'm volunteering to help campaign outside of my local polling place Tuesday. Any tips to help me connect with people and help make Liberty win? Short answer, light touch. For no other reason than, you can end up getting kicked out of the, kicked out from the polling place if you're too heavy on it. The biggest thing is there are a lot of people who are there who aren't already voting for us and who don't like who they're voting for, but they're there out of a sense of, you got to vote. It's election day, so you got to vote. And there are at least a few people there who still don't know who they're going to vote for. Keep track of that. Keep cognizant of that when you're talking and when you're spreading the message, that a lot of people out there don't know who they're going to vote for, or they might be leaning one way or another, or they're probably sure who they're going to vote for, but they don't like it at all. They don't like that they're voting for Trump, but, Biden, he's terrible. Or they don't like that they're voting for Biden, but, man, Trump, he really sucks. And you have to, reach them on a level that they get that this system sucks and that it's only... So the one thing I would keep saying is you're going to keep having terrible options to vote for if we don't start voting differently. If we don't reward them by continuing to vote for their terrible candidates, they're just going to keep putting out worse and worse and worse candidates. So I would focus on that. I don't know enough about your local area to tell you what might be specific to your area. You do. So whatever are the issues that are the most important in your area, talk about how Republicrats made that problem worse or created that problem and how our ideas could fix it. That's what I would focus on. A lot of people that are voting don't know they either don't know who they're going to vote for yet, or they're figuring it out, in line. Most have already figured it out, but a lot of them that have figured it out don't like who they're voting for. So I would just, connect as much as you can. But again, be light touch if at all possible. Let's see. James LaCroix asks, if you were taking questions, I never got to ask you about trucker ELD system. Yes, where the government forces truckers to take breaks and only drive for so long. Yeah, I have talked about this before. The federal government has no business telling truckers or anyone else how long they can drive for. And in fact, it actually makes things worse. We've seen an increase in the amount of accidents that have happened since these ridiculous programs were put in place. if you are ever driving down the interstate and you just see a truck on the side of the road and you assume that it was like broken down or something, it's probably not. That trucker's probably on the side of the road because their ELD system or their automatic log, electronic log, told them that they can't drive anymore. And they can maybe drive another mile or two after that, and that's about it. Or they'll get in trouble. They'll get fines. They could even lose their commercial driving license, and their employer could get fined. So instead of being able to drive even just a few more miles or 10 more minutes or 20 more minutes to a rest stop, which would be a safe place to put a car, they often have to just immediately move their truck off to the side, even if there's not a large shoulder, even if it's, along some, more rural end of the interstate or the road that they're on, where they're pretty much right next to the road and all the danger that can lead to. They have to do it for their safety. And it's a stupid system. The federal government should be completely out of trucking and everything else for that matter when it comes to driving. And they've done nothing to help things. It's only made things worse. And ultimately, all they're doing is taking out the owner-operators. That's the whole point of it, is to make the cost of being a trucker in this country prohibitively expensive so that only the largest companies can afford the cost of compliance. Surprise, surprise, regulations lead to cronyism, make the big crony companies able to survive and be able to thrive with less competition, while the smaller businesses, in this case small trucking companies and owner operators, go out of business. It's stupid. We should be completely out of it. They should be completely out of it. Love your wife, love you both dancing. Hey, thanks. That's from Ed Bones 2. Isaac Barrientos says, what can we do to encourage Latinos to vote for libertarians and letting them know the Libertarian Party is the best choice for all people, including immigrants? This is a great question, Isaac. I got to hang out with a lot of libertarian Latinos and in different settings. So a lot, obviously, in South Florida, mostly Cuban, but a lot of Puerto Ricans and others as well. And then in Texas, obviously a lot of predominantly Mexican and Central and South American, but also some, Puerto Ricans and Cubans and others. And what I heard over and over again is that, and this is true of all demographics, but Latinos have the Democrats and the Republicans show up to compete for their vote, and then they go away for 4 years. And they know this. They know that they're being largely pandered to. The reason that they tend to, I guess the majority tend to go Democrat as opposed to Republican is because the Democrats are the ones to use more welcoming language or more welcoming, verbiage in how they talk to them, whereas Republicans are more likely to talk about deportations and the wall and stuff like that. But they also know their records. They know that Barack Obama deported more immigrants, the vast majority of whom were Latinos, in his first term than Trump did in his first term. They know that. When I would bring that up, they would complete my sentence and tell me that. So I think that we have an excellent opportunity, especially when most of them, or a good number of them, either they or their parents or their grandparents, so it was fairly recently, they fled from a country that experienced creeping authoritarianism, whether it was socialism or fascism or communism. They have experienced what creeping totalitarianism looks like, and now they're seeing it here. Roberto is now a great supporter of ours because he fled Cuba. Roberto is the owner of Cuba Ocho, where we were supposed to have our event in Hawaii, in Miami. He fled Cuba in the 80s. He was getting away from Castro. He was getting away from communism, from creeping authoritarianism in Cuba. Then he comes here and he watches it happening slowly here too. I met someone else who was a business owner along Calle Ocho, who's now a supporter of ours after listening to our rally and seeing how we did on Calle Ocho. And he told me, he said, I fled Cuba. He said, in Cuba you can pay off the cops for a few $100. Here you have to have millions of dollars because you have to pay off the politicians. You can't really pay off the cops here. And if you do, you got to have some serious money. He said, so in some ways, it actually wasn't as bad in Cuba when it comes to running a business. The fact that the U.S., any part of the U.S., is even being remotely compared to a communist dictatorship should give pause and concern to all of us. for this specific group of people, Latinos, they know about as well as anyone else, if not better, since the majority of them, either themselves or their parents or grandparents, fled totalitarianism. They know what it looks like, and we can reach them with our message. And I am going to be a big part of doing that moving forward, is going to be a big part of making sure that we are messaging to everyone, but especially to those who most acutely understand. The more someone already understands the reality of the situation we're in, the easier it is for us to bring them over to our side. The less comfortable someone is with the current scenario that we're in, the current system and situation that we're in, the easier it is for us to bring them over, to make them realize that something has to change. Let's see here. Let's see some other questions here. A lot of comments, just not finding a question. Oh, now it's all the people. Oh, someone said, anyone else wipe away a tear? Just me. Listen, Dan Smoldt is the only person that can make me get moist in the eyes looking at my own video of myself saying something. Someone said, what's your show? This is my show. It's called My Fellow Americans. Let's see there. Amos Joseph asked, what's up, though? Let's see. Jack says, I have a question. Do you want to eliminate all taxes? Yes. Aren't some essential? No. Government is not a magical organization. And like any other organization or individual, they do not have a right to rob people. And if their business model is based on robbing people, it is illegitimate and should stop existing in that manner. If you or I and everyone else watching this decided that we were going to start a new service, and the way that we funded our service was by going around with a gun and telling everyone they had to give us a certain amount of money or we would make their lives miserable, but that once they gave us the money, we'd give them something back in exchange, a service. Not only would we end up going to jail for racketeering and extortion and a protection racket, and rightfully so, but also, if we were allowed to do that, we wouldn't have to give good services to people because we can just rob them. And we wouldn't have to be good stewards of the money we have because we could just rob them more. And there'd be the model lends itself to us being able to give them whatever garbage we want to, because it's not based on getting paid for the value we've provided. It's getting paid because we're threatening them with extortion, with harming them, with taking from them, with putting them in jail, with taking away their license, with garnishing from their wages. That is not a good model. Not only is it an immoral model that's based on theft and extortion and threats of violence, it's also not a good working model. It's going to lead to the kind of bad outcomes we're facing right now. And so what we believe is that government needs to move towards a voluntarily funded model. And the two best ways to do that, one is for direct fees for services. There are some services government provides that people would be more than happy to pay for. That will, by having it a direct fee for that service, government has to actually provide a fee that someone is willing to pay for that service, or else people aren't going to get that service. So that will work for some things. And then there are other things that aren't going to be well funded that way. So we could have something like a volunteer transfer fee, where when you buy anything or any transaction of any kind that involves money, hiring someone, buying something from someone, renting someone from something, whatever. Anytime there's an exchange of money, you could have, say, a 3, 4, 5% fee on that service, and people could choose whether or not to pay it. Now, if you don't pay it, you don't have to pay it. You're not going to get in any trouble. No one's going to come after you. You just didn't pay it. And the government didn't even know you did it. It's none of their business. But if you do pay it, now you have protection if something goes sour on that. So, for example, if I sold you a car for $10,000 and neither one of us paid the let's say $300 transfer fee, if something goes bad with the car and I'm not willing to make good on it, you can't sue me, because you didn't pay the transfer fee, and I didn't pay the transfer fee. But if you or I or both of us together do pay the transfer fee, now you can sue me. Now you're protected. You can use the government services. This would be a good value. People would more than likely be willing to pay it, and they'd have the protection from it, and it would allow government to fund all the other things that can't so easily be funded by direct fees for services.
And by doing it this way, government has to actually, again, provide value. They can't spend a fortune and run up a bunch of debt and tax you a bunch to pay for it because they don't have that power to do that. They actually have to provide value because you can choose whether or not whatever they're charging you is worth whatever they're providing you. Because, eureka, that works better than me telling you, give me as much money as I tell you that you owe me, and I'll give you the services that I think you need afterwards. So that's our answer to that. Daniel Manor says, I'm frustrated with this government. Do you think we will get to 5%? I do. I think everyone I have talked to who has been involved in this for a long period of times have said that they see more excitement for this campaign at the grassroots level than they've ever seen before. And I've heard that from people across the country. So yes, I do. Jason Koval says federal income tax turns into national sales tax. No, federal income tax turns into something that we talk about in history books. Can you discuss private prisons? Here's the thing with prison in general. The reason we have this for-profit prison model is because we gave government the ability to lock so many people in prison in the first place. That's what built this cottage industry and this profit around it. If we abolish these victimless crime laws and we set all the people free from these victimless crimes that never should have gone to jail in the first place, and we expunge their records and their arrest and their conviction records so they can go and get real good paying jobs and be able to rebuild their lives instead of ending up back in prison on recidivism because there's no real way with that felony record for them to be able to do well without resorting to a life of crime. If for no other reason, then that's what they're more comfortable with. That's what they know. They only know being in prison after many, many years, and there's no real way for them to be able to rebuild their life because they have that felony record, which follows them around everywhere. When we do that, when the vast majority of people that are in prison leave and never come back, and then we look at the remaining ones that are there and see, are these people an actual threat to the public, or these people that are in there for like shoplifting and things that could have just as easily been handled by making them pay back the person that they robbed and making them whole, and then teaching them, having them go to like a diversion program or something which costs pennies on the dollar what imprisoning them does and actually allows them to learn from their lesson and move forward. There's not going to be any profit in prisons. There's not going to be enough people in prisons to profit from. Let's see. Michael Ruggiero says, how are libertarians going to prepare for the next election now? That's an excellent question. Moving forward after this election, we need to build on whatever momentum we get from this election and work towards. In 2021, there are races. There are gubernatorial races in New Jersey and in Virginia, and there are other races across the country. Every year has elections. Most of them are on the even years, but there are ones in the odd years too. The short answer is all of the people we brought into this movement, I'm going to continue engaging them and continue building this grassroots army for human liberty. And I hope that if you're watching this, I hope that you join me in that. Spike, what are you doing November 4th? Joshua McHose asks. On the 4th, I'm actually still going to be in Dallas. I'm going to be spending time with some friends. On the 5th, I'm going home and sleeping. I'm going to sleep. I might sleep the 6th too. And then after that, I'm not sure. But moving forward, we're going to just keep moving forward to build this party and this movement. What are your thoughts on Austin Peterson? Doot asks, what are your thoughts on Austin Peterson, his criticisms of the LP and the Liberty Republican fat coalition strategy he advocates for? Austin Peterson came in 6th place in his race when he ran as a Republican for the Senate. He came in 6th. He had the best social media. He came in 6th because when you propose an actual liberty agenda, good luck getting anywhere in the Republican Party. Someone like a Rand Paul, who had to fight and struggle to be able to get in and was able to do so. A big part of why he was able to was because of the legacy of his father, Ron Paul. And yet you see what they make him do every day. They make him sign off on stuff that is not even remotely libertarian and put the libertarian brand or libertarian name next to it. And even though very often what he's promoting or what he's allowing other people to use his name to promote is not even remotely libertarian. Then you see someone like Justin Amash, who finally just got fed up and said, no, I'm going to be a Republican who stands up for liberty at all times. And the Republican Party said, okay, get out. That's what happens. You either have to go with it or you have to get out. Thomas Massey, others that are in the Republican Party, they are allowed to say what they need to say to be able to build up to be able to preserve their Republican or libertarian bona fides. But when push comes to shove, if Thomas Massey's vote is needed, he'll either vote for what his vote is needed for, even if it goes against libertarianism, or he'll start getting sidelined. That's the reality of the Republican Party and the Democrat Party too, for that matter. It's a failed strategy. It doesn't work. We have to build something new. The Republican machine has no room for liberty. It has a little room for liberty lip service, but when push comes to shove, it has no real room for liberty. Here's a good question. Christian Varney says, Spike, a lot of libertarians fail at speaking to solutions against tech censorship. Many people don't want to hear it is a private company. They can do what they want. What would you say to them? I'd like to hear a better spoken ANCAP/market anarchist than myself answer this question. So you're right. Most people don't want to hear it's private. They can do what they want. And it is private. But here's the thing. That's not the problem. We're looking at the conclusion to a problem instead of the root of the problem. So, for example, if you came into my home and you were wearing a shirt I didn't like, and I said, hey, buddy, I don't like that shirt. If you can take it off and stay here, or you have to take it, or if you want to keep it on, you have to leave. That's not a problem because it's my property. If I then bought every single property anywhere near me and put up laws in place to make it illegal or cost prohibitive for anyone to have another property, and now I control all of the area around you, and I'm telling you what you can't wear, now we have a problem. Because I have set myself up as essentially a monopoly and have basically ruled things by decree. That is the problem. The problem is not that Facebook is deciding what can and cannot be said, or Twitter is deciding what can and cannot be said, or Google and YouTube are deciding what can and cannot be said. The problem is that they are using regulations to make it prohibitively expensive for other companies to be able to build themselves up as the newest social media venue or the newest social media outlet. And in the rare cases that they do, like MeWe, they use government to put a smear campaign on them and force them into selling their company to someone else. That's what happens. Also, we have heard, or not MeWe, TikTok. With MeWe, we've seen that the companies who don't want to engage in that get threatened directly by government. They get told if something happens and we trace it back to people saying stuff on your platform, you're going to be held liable for it. So that's the problem. The problem, as always, is government. We have to get rid of these regulations. We have to get rid of, smear campaigns, smear campaigns without evidence against companies who are not censoring people, and we need to just have less government control and threats against private entities who want to allow whatever they can. That fixes the problem at its source. Let's see. Some good questions. Jason Koval, where can I get started as a libertarian candidate in government? Whatever state you are in, go to that state affiliate. And if you're not already a part of it, and if you're not already a part of the local affiliates in that area, join them and become a part of them and become active in them and let them know what it is you want to do. Then whatever, I'm not sure what you're running for, if it's, whether it's governor or city council or mayor or whatever it is, whatever your constituent base is going to be, whatever district or state or county or area you are running for, get to know as many of the different groups in that area. Everything from churches to interest groups to the Rotary Club, Optimist Club, 4-H, NAACP, Black Lives Matter, anti-lockdown groups, Second Amendment groups, everyone. Get to know everyone, let them know what you're running for, and ask to get to meet with them to listen to what they have to say. Not to say what you want to say. Go to where they are, ask if you can go to one of their things or to have a meeting with them to listen to what they have to say. Go there with a pen and paper or with your phone out. It's probably better to do pen and paper. With a phone, it looks like you're not paying attention. And write stuff down. Even if you already know what you're going to run on, write stuff down. Ask them questions. Here is what you are doing there. You are building a rapport and you are showing them that you're actually listening to them. And walk away from those meetings where you give a little bit of your policies and a little bit about it and how it would help what they've been talking about. But more importantly, have a nice meeting with them where you listen to them and ask them questions. They will walk away very, very, very impressed. And when you're running, that will serve you very well. Those are the two main things I would say. In fact, Pat Barnum said, contact your state Libertarian Party. Jonathan Traumer, I think I'm saying that correctly, says, do you think most people are and will shy away from people like you and Joe because it's so drastically different and not on if it's good or bad for America? Honestly, Jonathan, most people just don't know about us. When we have been on the campaign trail, and I can tell you when I've been on the trail, and we tried to have as many of my events as possible at like parks and outdoor areas where there wasn't a limit on the number of people there, and we tried to do it in areas where there were large, residential neighborhoods nearby, so that they would hear, from the speakers there, hear me talking, and we would invite everyone who wanted to come and ask questions. I got to interact with a ton of people who did not come there because they were libertarians. They came there because they saw our big blue bus and they heard me talking about stuff and just wanted to find out more. When we present our platform and our ideas in a way that connects with people, that is engaging and dynamic and empathetic to their situation, more often than not, they either convert over or they go, wow, that's a lot of really good points. I don't know if I'm going to vote for you, but I'd like what you have to say. That's there's this misperception that, this misconception that people hear that, Americans have rejected libertarianism. Americans live as libertarians every day, whether they like it or not. Every time someone goes a few miles over the speed limit because it doesn't make sense for it to be that low and they have somewhere they need to get, every time that someone does something, a financial transaction without, reporting it to the IRS because it's none of their business and, I should be able to, make $50 or $100 here without having to report it. Every time someone does something that's illegal, but it's not hurting anyone, it's a completely victimless crime. It's barely even a crime to begin with. Anytime someone finds ways around the loopholes and burdens and barriers and regulations that are in place, they are engaging in libertarian direct action. They are engaging in anti-authoritarianism. We all have that streak in us of recognizing that these people are idiots that pretend to rule over us. They have no idea what they're talking about, and they really should not be telling us how to live. There are very, very few people you will meet in life who will say, government knows better than me, politicians know better than me, bureaucrats know better than me, and the cronies who run them know better than me. Almost never will you actually experience that. That's not our problem. Our problem is that because our ideas make so much sense and because we pose such a threat to the status quo, that status quo does every single thing it can to shut us out of the conversation. But that's a good problem to have. If your only problem is that people haven't heard of you yet, then there's nowhere to go but up. Let's see here. Colby Palmer says, I am unfortunately too young to vote in this election, but I did convince my sister and brother-in-law who normally don't vote for you and Joe. Fantastic. Thank you, man. Andrea Danielle says, no candidate is more inspiring than Mark Charles running with Adrian Wallace. I would dispute that. I think Joe is more inspiring. But said, would you ever debate Adrian? Absolutely. I'd be happy to. Pat Barnum, would you talk about qualified immunity, please? So many people don't understand this cop protection plan. Qualified immunity is a ridiculous... So it started in 1871. There was a law passed called the Civil Rights Act of 1871, and basically what it said, among other things, was that if a police officer or government agent infringes upon your rights in any way, you can sue them. You can sue them for doing that to you. Because why not? Because you should be able to do that. In the 1960s, so almost 100 years later, the Supreme Court said, well, unless they thought what they did was reasonable. Unless the person you're trying to sue says that they think what they did was reasonable. Imagine if you could go to court and say, Your Honor, I know that I've been accused of murder and all that, but I think what I did was perfectly reasonable. And the judge said, oh, okay, well then I'm going to throw it out because you think it was reasonable. That's qualified immunity. Now, here's how qualified immunity, you should be able to tell just from that why this is bad. But let's talk about specifically how this has played out. Derek Chauvin, the man who killed George Floyd, he had 17 other complaints against him before he murdered George Floyd, including wrongful death. He may have murdered other people. And when the Minneapolis Police Department looked at Derek Chauvin, they made the same cost-benefit analysis that police departments and child protective services agencies and other government agencies across the country make when they encounter the bad apples in their proverbial bunch. They looked at Derek Chauvin and said, this guy sucks. What a bad cop. He's hurting people. I'd love to get rid of him, but we'd have to fight the police unions. That's going to cost us an absolute fortune, and more than likely, we won't be able to get rid of him. And he's not costing us anything by staying on the force because qualified immunity. He can't get sued. We can't get sued. So we'll just leave him on the force. He'll probably end up murdering someone, and then we can just, when he gets arrested for that and convicted, then we can just fire him. This encourages bad policing. It disincentivizes and disencourages good policing. It is why when Derek Chauvin spent nearly 10 minutes casually murdering George Floyd, the other officers just stood there because they knew that there's no accountability when bad officers do bad things. Ending qualified immunity flips all that around. Now, when the Minneapolis Police Department looks at someone like Derek Chauvin, they go, whoa, 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 we got to get rid of this guy immediately because we can get sued out of existence by him and his actions. The police unions will also look at him and go, whoa, 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 we need to get rid of him so we don't get sued. The other officers, when the Derek Chauvins try to do something like that, stop him so that they aren't sued as accomplices. Suddenly, it turns out, whether we're talking about large crony businesses, whether we're talking about politicians, whether we're talking about judges, prosecutors, government agents, or police officers, or anyone else, when you do not hold them accountable, they're more likely to do bad things because they can. And when you do hold them accountable, they're less likely to do bad things, and the people over them are less likely to even let them be in a position of power to begin with on the odd chance that they might do something bad. Ending qualified immunity is crucial to ending police brutality and government abuse in general, and not just qualified immunity. We need to end absolute immunity for judges and prosecutors. We need to end, and politicians. We need to end the idea of sovereign immunity, where the government can't be sued for their actions. People need to get sued when they do bad things, period. So let's see what else. Nicholas Andreasen, in your opinion, did Trump's actions in the first debate lead to Fox News' coverage of Joe Jorgensen? Very possibly. I know that there are some libertarians in the Fox News community that wanted to have her on. Maybe that helped free that up for that to happen. So I'm not sure. Possibly. Buddy C asks, who built the cages? Barack Obama did. Actually, it started under Bush, but Obama continued it. Stetson Preston says, shout out to all the people that are banned from Facebook. Absolutely, man. Also, in addition to that, the Libertarian Party is actively working to work with libertarians who have been either banned from Facebook or given that weird message where you aren't allowed to do, complicated. It was this weird thing that it said that you couldn't do if you tried to post in a group. So if you go to the Libertarian Party page or you inbox the Libertarian Party page, they can send you a form, and we actually linked to it on our social media, on our Facebook and on our Twitter and IG for people that have been kicked off of Facebook to be able to fill out this form. And the Libertarian Party is actively working with Facebook to get as many people reinstated as they can. This happens every October. Especially on the even years, during the bigger election years, that they just silence dissenting political opinion. But we are working with them to be able to get that undone. Let's see. Hunter Martin, why isn't civil asset forfeiture counted as theft? It should be. Civil asset forfeiture, if you actually combine all other forms of theft, civil asset forfeiture is more than that, and so we would actually, that's on our platform, is ending civil asset forfeiture, which, guess who started that? Guess who the architect of civil asset forfeiture is? You're going to be shocked to discover that it was Joe Biden. What are some of the items on the agenda for the first 100 days of the Jorgensen-Cohen administration? So let's see. Number one is immediate declaration of the end of the wars overseas and beginning the process of bringing the troops home. They won't come home instantly, but that process can begin. It starts with ending the wars or declaring an end to the wars. Then the next thing would be descheduling all the drugs. And ending the war on drugs and victimless crimes, and beginning the process of expunging the records of the people who have been victimized by that war on drugs and other victimless crimes. And then what else? Ending the war on guns by ordering the ATF to, well, first of all, getting rid of any pro-gun control regulations and making an executive order that all gun regulations at any level of government, including local and state level, are patent violations of the Second Amendment and will be treated as such by the Department of Justice, and then ordering the ATF to essentially not do anything. And firing the heads of the ATF and not rehiring anyone. There are many things that we will do. Really, the first 100 days is mostly going to be going through all of the bad regulations and executive orders that are in place and just getting rid of all of them. Getting rid of anything that isn't there explicitly to affirm and protect the lives, rights, and property of the people. Anything else goes. And the beauty of that is that by undoing all that garbage at the executive level, the American people will be able to see the immediate and profound benefit of being that much more free. And we'll be able to use that to negotiate further with Congress. And by negotiate, I mean tell them that they can either go along with our agenda or get replaced with people who do. Let's see. Justin Brown, hey Spike, we love you and Joe. What is next after the election and how do we continue to mobilize? Stay tuned. We're going to have a lot of fun moving forward. Dylan Story, I hope next election to run Libertarian here in Michigan. Thank you, Spike, for indirectly giving me the confidence to do so. Hey, thanks, man. That means a lot to me. But yeah, reach out to Libertarian Party of Michigan. There's some great people there. Some of my best friends are in LP, Michigan. Buddy C asks, what is your healthcare plan? 3/4 of every dollar that you spend on healthcare is just the cost of compliance with red tape and bureaucracy. We'd get rid of all of that. We'd also end things like patent protections for drugs that have been around for decades. We'd end certificate of need laws, which are a major contributor to the cost of healthcare because it allows, and it's hard to measure how much it contributes to it because what certificate of need laws do is they allow large crony hospital systems and hospitals to effectively shut out any of their smaller competitors from opening a competing service, a competing hospital, a competing imaging center, a competing testing center, a competing whatever, what happens when you restrict supply while demand for something goes up? The cost of it goes up. This is basic economics. So it's hard to measure just how much of the cost of health, how much more healthcare costs go up as a result of that, but it certainly doesn't go down from it. So we get rid of certificate of need laws. And once the cost of healthcare gets down to what it should be, we're not going to need comprehensive health insurance because people will be able to afford to pay for it out of pocket. Doctors will be offering things like monthly payment plans for, unlimited services within their network. Doctors will be offering things like free consultations, because once you get rid of that bureaucracy, which is driving up the cost and driving down the ability to provide services, it's so much better. We didn't need this pandemic to tell us our healthcare system was a mess. It just really exposed the real problems with it. So our healthcare plan is get government out of it entirely. Michael Testa says, I was told that I wasn't allowed to work as a poll worker in Missouri because I'm not a D or R. How can we change this? I don't know that that's true. I don't know how the rules are in Missouri. So because I don't know, I would encourage you to reach out to the Libertarian Party in Missouri and ask them about this, because that might be some kind of weird law in Missouri, in which case it needs to be overturned. If it isn't, then this was a case of suppression and that needs to be dealt with. Either way, I would get in touch with the Libertarian Party of Missouri. They'd be able to tell you that. Benjamin Hurst, would you give U.S. territories representation in Congress? Would you give them their independence if they asked for it? The short answer is if they wanted independence, they would get it. And before that, we would end the Jones Act, which is what's making it so difficult for them to begin with the protectionism and the other things that are built into the Jones Act that make it so difficult for people in, especially the island territories, just to be able to live their lives. It massively drives up the cost of living there by greatly restricting who they can get services from. It's a terrible, terrible law. it needs to go. And then based on that, then once they have their ability to be able to operate better without all that federal burden on them, then they can decide, do they want to be independent? Do they want to be a state? Do they want to remain a territory? But right now, they're being given the short end of the stick with the Jones Act, and it needs to end. Jones Act actually hurts all of us, but not nearly as much as the people that are in the island territories like Puerto Rico, also Hawaii. I mean, really all the island areas. Someone said gas tax is a bad example of fee for government service. The gas tax is not a fee for a government service. The gas tax is just another tax. They say it's for the roads, but most of it doesn't go to the roads. I'm talking about direct fees for a specific service that you can opt out of if you don't want that service. Is taxation theft? Yes, actually, technically it's extortion. Theft typically implies, like pickpocketing or something like that. It is an act of extortion. Theft under the threat of force. Which tax is the most oppressive of them all, and why? Honestly, to me, it's the one that isn't technically a tax, and that is the Federal Reserve inflating the monetary supply to hand it to government, who then, makes you pay for it with interest. It's a double tax, and it's one that you don't see right off the bat. It's one, especially the inflation one, that you don't realize that the reason the cost of living keeps going up so steadily is because the government's inflating the monetary supply and making the value of your money slowly dwindle over time. In the last 103 or 107 years since the Federal Reserve was created, your money has lost 98 cents of its value, 98% of its value. Let me put that another way. Imagine if your money was worth 50 times what it's worth right now. That's how much they've robbed you. That is the worst tax, and they don't even call it one. What would you say to someone who wants to vote Libertarian but is afraid that if they don't vote Trump, then Biden would win the state? I would tell them that whatever the reason they voted Republican or for Trump, Trump has done whatever Hillary would have done. He has, and in fact, he probably was able to do more than Hillary could do because Republicans would have fought Hillary tooth and nail, but instead they lay down and take it when it's Trump doing it. Do you like the Second Amendment? Well, then you won't like all the red flag laws that Donald Trump has been pushing for in all 50 states. You won't like his ATF banning bump stocks and suppressors. And now this most recent ruling that happened a couple days ago where the ATF ruled that long-barreled pistols are now illegal. But they didn't tell you what a long-barreled pistol is, exactly how long that barrel can be. So we don't know. We know it applies to things like the Honey Badger and the AR and AK pistols that Donald Trump just banned. But we don't know if Donald Trump also just banned like the old school long barreled revolvers, because their barrels are pretty damn long. So, like 44 Magnums and the 357 Magnums and stuff. We don't know. And they kept it vague. And they told you that if you have any question, you got to mail your gun into them. So in order for you to know if Donald Trump banned your pistol, you have to mail it to the ATF and wait up to a year to find out if you're ever going to get it back. If you voted for Donald Trump because you wanted to see an end to deficit spending, Donald Trump has run up more debt in one term than any president before him. If you voted Republican because you wanted taxes to be lower, once you factor in Donald Trump's failed tariff program, the average American family is paying more tax burden than they were when he got into office. If you voted Republican and Trump because you wanted to see less spending, Donald Trump has spent more money than any president before him, again, in just one term. This year alone, he has signed off on over $7 trillion in spending and is trying to push for yet another multi-trillion-dollar crony bailout by the end of the year. That would make it where he has spent over $10 trillion in 1 year, which will be more than double what any president before him was able to spend in 1 year. If you voted for Donald Trump because you wanted the economy to do well, we're in the worst recession of our time, while at the same time, stock prices are at and above all-time highs. If you voted for Donald Trump because you wanted someone that was going to fight against the Democrats, Donald Trump has signed off on almost every single bill that the Democrats in the House and the Republicans in Senate have handed him. If you voted for Donald Trump because you wanted someone who would keep his promises, Donald Trump has broken all of his promises. He built a few miles of wall, and that's about it. If you voted for Trump, what's left? Oh, because you wanted the wars to end. Because he said he would do that. There are more troops overseas now than there were when Donald Trump got into office. And if the problem is that you don't like Trump, but you really don't like Biden, That speaks to the Republican system, whereby they play good cop to their voting base and bad cop to the other voting base, so that the fear of the other one makes you keep voting for that one. That's how the Republican rope-a-dope system works, and it does not end until we stop participating in it. Someone said he deserves some R&R and some time at the beach. Thank you. Dan Berman says, what if every libertarian took over the Republican Party? Then we could just rebrand it the Libertarian Party. I don't think that's going to work. They tried that. It didn't work. Nicholas Andresen says, how do we make sure the Libertarian nominee makes the presidential debates in 2024? So here's the thing, Nicholas. I'm increasingly convinced that we need to just build our own thing. If we had made 15%, if they had included us in the polling that would have showed 15%, they would have just raised it to 20% or 25%. I'm increasingly convinced that we need to just continue moving forward at the grassroots level, build our own thing that's even more popular than theirs, and then decide if we want to invite them to our thing. That's really how I feel about the, they know if there were an easy way to do an end run around their system, their system would end immediately. And they know that. They know that if Joe had been on that debate stage and if I had been on the stage with Harris and Pence, it would be over. It would be obvious who the best pick is. So I'm increasingly convinced we shouldn't even deal with them. Derek Ambrose says, Spike, I have a question for you. Rural America has an issue with gaining access to reliable, high-speed internet. There are many government programs that have given millions of our tax dollars to major internet and telephone companies. These companies are making little to no progress, shocker, in using this money to provide the service to these rural people. They are taking this money and using it in other markets. Will you make them pay this money back to the government? And is there anything in your platform that would grant money to smaller providers to actually provide the service to the people that need it the most? Plowing fiber or installing wireless systems that are capable of providing them with the internet is not cheap. Back to that on why it's not cheap. And the providers will not be able to make a profit in any reasonable amount of time. Sorry, I got kind of long-winded there. Excellent question. You started to answer your own question. The problem, you dealt with the problem there. The problem is that money has been given to large companies who did not invest that money into infrastructure for rural areas. The smaller companies can't do it because it's so expensive. Why is it so expensive? Well, you're going to be utterly shocked when I tell you this, but if you factor in the regulations, the taxes, the mandates, and the subsidies, which we're about to talk about how subsidies drive up prices, when you look at all of that, when you look at the overall regulatory burden of government being involved in this to begin with, that is where the vast majority of the cost is. If you get that out of it, now the smaller companies can afford, and the larger companies too, can afford to be able to provide services in these areas. More importantly, the smaller ones can. Now you're saying, but how do subsidies drive up the cost? A subsidy goes to a company and now they have more money. That's how it drives up the cost. So let's say you and I are both competing to provide internet. And so you're internet company A and I'm internet company B. And internet company B, my company, gets a bunch of money every year. And you and I buy all the same stuff, right? We use all the same equipment to be able to do what we do. We need the same supplies. We need the same materials. We need the same fiber optic cables. We need the same, metal spools that they put them on that go on the trucks. We need the trucks. We need the workers. We need all these different things. And we need the same competing things to provide the same competing services. And I'm at a distinct advantage for driving up the cost because I can afford to drive up the cost. And you can't afford to pay the cost. I can go to the vendors and say, I'm willing to pay this for this, and I'll take everything you got, and I'll take as many things as I can, and I'll pay you this much for it. And then you show up and go, I'll take what you got left, and I can't afford to pay that much. So even if they work with you, you're already paying more than I would have paid. And the reason I'm able to pay more is because I got a bunch of free money that I didn't have to earn, and that drives up the cost that both of us are paying, but you're the only one that's actually paying it. I made the taxpayer paid for it, and you have to pay the taxes, which mean you helped paid to build my business up. That is what is driving up the cost. That, along with the taxes and the mandates and the regulations that make it more expensive to do it, that's what drives it up. So if we get government out of it, now the smaller providers in the rural areas can afford to provide it. Now, in general, it will be cheaper to provide internet, and the pricing for your internet service will go down. So, and that can be applied to anything, healthcare, infrastructure, anything else. Let's see what company. April All Year asks, what, if any, big thing do you think will break the mainstream media from strictly endorsing the duopoly? Nothing. The mainstream media is owned by 6 multinational, multi-trillion-dollar or multi-billion-dollar companies that get trillions of dollars a year in bailouts from us. They have a vested interest in keeping this crony system growing. Make no mistake, when we win, when we end this system of cronyism, they end. Mainstream media is the mouthpiece organization, the propaganda wing of the crony industrial complex in this country. It is why all media is built around encouraging consumerism, obedience to government, obedience to the two-party system. It's all factored in. It entertains you with the aim, with the end goal game, and with the end... A game doesn't need to be in there. With the end goal of having you support this system. So what will the big thing will be when we break the entire system? I'm getting so many people saying, I wish if I could share all of this. Just so many people saying how they're voting for me and Joe and how excited they are, and that thank you so much. Craig DaCosta says, will the election night celebration in Dallas be live streamed for the rest of us that cannot be there? I don't know if the whole thing is going to be live streamed. I will certainly be going live at least a few times. Aaron Chapman, what are your thoughts on contact tracing? Sorry if you've answered this question already. Contact tracing, if it's done voluntarily, I have no problem with voluntarily and not operated by government. I'm fine with it. Anything else is if you want government. You want government to be more involved in your life, let it trace every time you're around anyone. Here's a question. Can we meet in person? Oh, thank you. Jorge Mendoza says, can we meet in person? You become my new role model. Thanks, man. Buddy C says, do you think fentanyl played a role in that death? I'm not sure what death you're referring to. A couple of repeat questions here. Where they had kept asking it until I answered it. Jorge Mendoza says, what questions should we be asking people who are running for a place in the BOE, Special Appeals Court, and Circuit Court? I think you need to just make sure that they are operating from this. So these are specifically appeals courts. I guess the two main questions I would ask are... The two main questions are, how much deference do you have to executive power and previous case law as opposed to interpreting what the Constitution originally said? And if they lean more on case law and executive deference and legislative deference, then I would definitely not vote for them. Spike, what is your favorite holiday? Mercedes Lynn Dimitrowski says, what is your favorite holiday? These are the ones that always trip me up. So growing up, my favorite was Hanukkah because I got gifts for a week in a row or a week and a day in a row. I kind of like Passover now. Probably Pesach, Passover. Typical libertarianism. Pesach is the holiday where we celebrate specifically the fact that the angel of death did not kill the firstborn of the Jews, but also more broadly speaking, and when we read the Megillah and all of that, we're celebrating the fact that that the Jews who were slaves were liberated. And so it's a celebration of liberation. It's I guess not coincidental that that's become my favorite holiday. As a kid, I definitely liked Hanukkah the most because I got gifts 8 days in a row. Christian Varney asks, my boy Ryan Raymond, I love Ryan Raymond, is going to run against one of the worst Republicans in the state of Kentucky. Any advice for him? Yes, call me. I definitely want to help you in whatever you're running for, Ryan. You are a dear, dear friend, and I would be more than happy to help you one-on-one and lending my support as much as possible. Sunny Mindfeast says, why was the campaign ended before Tuesday? The campaign has not ended. Here's a good question, and it's kind of a difficult one to unpack. What do you Michael Testa says, what do you think about gerrymandering? Is it just a political process that should happen freely, or should it be stopped? Here's the thing. Gerrymandering, and for those who don't know what gerrymandering is essentially the act of so whenever districting happens, whenever the state and state legislatures and Congress determine what their boundaries look like for their different districts, gerrymandering is essentially the act of making these weird shaped districts to ensure that your party does better than the other party. And so you look at the different voting habits and demographics of different areas, and you make these really weird shaped things. I personally think the best way to deal with gerrymandering is to come up with like a computer program that has some very simple metrics built in that simply say, if this is the overall demographics of this area, then every single district in this area, or every single district or constituency in this area has to have relatively matching demographics and has to be at least somewhat contiguously shaped. It's not going to be a perfect square or rectangle, or circle or whatever, but it can't be this 180 side shape or whatever. I think that would deal with a lot of it. It might require a constitutional amendment because there's not really anything in there saying or defining gerrymandering. So I think the easier way would be find a solution as opposed to trying to ban something. And I think technology would help a lot with that. Levi Lauber says, where do you folks stand on Pebble Mine in Alaska? Now, if I'm correct, Pebble Mine is the one that was seized by eminent domain. If that is the case, then it shouldn't exist at all, because eminent domain shouldn't exist. The government should not be seizing land for any purpose. If government needs land for something, it should be able to provide a fair market value to the person who owns it, to the point where they want to sell it. And if they don't want to sell it, that's none of government's business, because it's their property, and no one should ever force you to sell anything you don't want to sell. Brian Sutton says, how would you get us back on the gold standard? I'm going to let the market, I believe that we should let the market decide that. Allowing for free market providers to provide you with currency has a vested better system than having the government continue to be a monopoly on currency. A monopoly does not have to provide you with good value, but competing providers do, because they'll lose you if you don't. You can choose to go to someone else who provides a better currency. So at that point, it's backed by the competition. It's backed by the value that company provides. And if they don't, they lose your business. So then it doesn't matter what it's backed by, because the market will sort that out far better than the government ever will. Back when we were on, one of the times that we were on the gold standard, we used a system called Bretton Woods, and government, it was a gold standard, but government just decided how many dollars gold was worth, which was not markedly different than the system we have now. Jason Romano says, Spike, do you like salsa or bachata more? It depends on the mood I'm in. Usually salsa, but sometimes bachata. And for those who know what salsa and bachata is, they know exactly what I'm talking about. Craig DaCosta, after you rest up following the election, will you come and visit Hawaii now since no longer required to do a 14-day house arrest quarantine if you test negative within 72 hours prior to arrival? Yes. Yes, and I wish they had done that sooner because I wanted to get Hawaii. Joe went to Alaska. I wanted to do Hawaii. No one seemed to be against this. Hawaii seemed to be, everyone was fine with me going to Hawaii. And then the quarantine thing would have made it, I would have had to stay in the same building, same apartment or condo or hotel or whatever for 14 days and not go anywhere, which isn't as nice as it sounds because I'd be stuck in the room. And if it were near the ocean, I'd have to look at the ocean but not be able to go there, much less be able to go and do anything campaign related. So yes. Let's see here. Brett Robertson says, Spike, are you going to try to get the presidential nomination in 2024 if you aren't all elected? I don't ever rule anything out, but 2024 is a long way away. And even 2022, which is when you would need to start really planning in earnest if you were going to run, is pretty far away. So I really, I don't know what I'm going to be doing then. But I will say this. However this election goes, whatever moving forward I choose to do, I'm not going anywhere. I'm here to spread the message of liberty to whatever extent I can, in whatever way I can, to the most impact that I can. Let's see. Oh crap! It's already 9:30. You know what? I'm going to end on this question. This is a good question, and I will end on this because I didn't realize it was already 9:30. Perry Beard says, Spike, if we get 5%, we get federal funding. Some people say to use it. Some people say refuse it. What do you say? That is an excellent question, Perry. So for those who don't know what he's talking about, if we get 5% this year or more, we will qualify for something called federal funding. And basically what that means is right now Republicans and Democrats, they get federal matching funds, which means that they get to rob you with income taxes, because as we know, all taxation is theft. They get to rob you with income taxes to help pay for their campaigns. Hundreds of millions of dollars Joe Biden and Donald Trump and the Republicans and Democrats get every single election cycle to be able to help pay for their campaigns. If we get that 5%, we now get federal matching funds up to and including whatever amount we've raised as well. This is money that's already been robbed. And so some people say, well, we should use it because it's already been taken from people. Other people say, well, we talk about never using stolen funds or never using force for political purposes. And yet we're talking about taking money that was stolen from people for political purposes, for our campaign. Here's what I think. And I actually was convinced of this. I used to say, just don't take it. Here's what I think now. Give it back. So we get the money, and then we give it back to people. We find charities across the country and give it back. Because, I mean, let's say we raise $5 million or $10 million, that's how much money we'll get from the federal government. Give it back. Give that $5 million, $10 million, whatever we get back. 10,000, 5,000, 50,000, 20,000, 100,000 at a time. Give it back to charities across the country. What this will allow us to do is, A, we're showing that we're not hypocrites. In fact, just the opposite. We're taking money that was stolen and giving it back to those in the most need, kind of doing the Robin Hood thing. The next thing that we do is we show that we're better than the other parties because we are able to, instead of taking that money and keeping it for ourselves and using it to fly around the country and jet set around and eat at restaurants and stay in hotels and everything else that you have to do to pay for this to do a campaign and do video ads and everything else. Instead, we're giving it to those who need it the most. Then we use the earned media we get from that to talk about the fact that these people wouldn't be in the situations that they're in if government wasn't making their lives so difficult to begin with. So, for example, if we give to a homeless shelter, we can say, you know what, there wouldn't be so many homeless people if it wasn't for all of these taxes and property taxes and income taxes and zoning laws and building codes and everything else that drive up the cost of housing unnecessarily and make it so that an increasing number of Americans can't afford to be able to have reliable housing. If we give to a soup kitchen, we can talk about the fact that it's illegal to feed the homeless without a license in most parts of the country. If we give money to, I don't know, wherever we give to. If we give to people that are the victims of violence, gang violence, we can talk about the fact that gang violence happens as a result of the war on drugs, the same way that, the gangland warfare used to happen in the 1930s and 20s, 1920s as a result of the, or 19 teens and 1920s as a result of the prohibition on alcohol, that the same thing's happening now with the war on drugs, and that we need to end the war on drugs in order to be able to stop that gang violence. We could give to all sorts of other charities, and in doing so, we can then turn around and challenge the Republicans and the Democrats to do the same thing with the money they're stealing, the money that they're getting, with the laws that they wrote in place to be able to rob you to pay for their campaigns. And then we can also pledge that when we take over, we will end that. We will no longer rob you to pay for campaigns. We will no longer have this program, and that for as long as it exists, we will never take a single penny to keep. We will always give it back to the people who are the most victimized by this system. So that's my answer to that. And I think I'm gonna leave it at that, folks, because I got to start packing because we're leaving in the morning. So folks, again, be sure to check me out tomorrow. If you live anywhere near Columbia, South Carolina, I would love to see you, to be able to meet with you in person. I will be in Columbia, South Carolina at the State House on Gervais Street from 2 to 5. And then I will be in Dallas on Tuesday for the election night party. I'll go live at least a few times there. Also on Tuesday, be sure to check out right here on Muddy Waters Media. Matt Wright and Jason Lyon will be doing a special episode of the Muddy Waters of Freedom, a special Spike Cohen-less episode of the Muddy Waters of Freedom, where they will be doing an election night special covering the election. I'll probably call in at least a few times, but Matt and Jason are two fantastic people, and they will have a awesome show. So be sure to tune in for that. And I'm not going anywhere, folks, and I hope you aren't either. This is just the beginning. We are building nothing less than a grassroots army fighting for a world set free in our times. This is not just about this election. This is not just about me and Joe. This is not just about the, down ballot candidates that are running this time. This is about building a movement that ends the system of cronyism, that ends the wars, that ends the victimization of entire communities, that ends the locking up of tens of millions of people, that ends the victimization of our veterans. By the way, side note there, 1 out of every 10 people that's in prison is a veteran. 2.3%, 2.5% of the world's prison population are U.S. veterans, people who swore an oath to protect and defend the Constitution and the American people against all enemies, foreign and domestic, people that signed up to fight for our freedoms, and they're in prison. So we end that kind of treatment. We are fighting for nothing less than a world set free in our time, and I hope that you join me moving forward after this election, in this election and moving forward from it, because we aren't going anywhere. And we are sharing a message, a very clear and empathetic message, that you own yourself, you own your life and your body, you own your labor and your property. No one should be able to harm you, and we, the people of liberty, the Libertarian Party and the Libertarian Movement, stand alongside you and fight against it, against anyone who would try to harm you. And that is our message moving forward. That is our policy, and we will achieve it. And if at any time you feel like it's hopeless, I want you to remember something. Every major movement that has resulted in great things for humanity. Name a positive social movement or political movement that has happened anywhere in the history of humankind. It has always started with a small group of people who knew what the odds were, who knew how hopeless it looked, and didn't care, because they knew that the alternative was giving up and surrendering, and that they would never do that, and that they would never stop. They would never rest until they achieved the freedom until they achieve the results that they wanted in their time. That is what we are doing now. And when we achieve that, when the wars are over, when the victimization of the people has ended, when this government is brought to heel, when the cronies are kicked out and the bums and idiots that put them in have been kicked out, and the system of bureaucracy that has made our lives so difficult has been kicked out, when we have reclaimed our lives from those in power who wished to harm us and to rob us to pay for it, when all of that is over, it will be you that people remember. It will be you that people talk about, the pioneers and the trailblazers who looked at the odds and said, I don't care what the odds are. I don't care if anyone's telling me that it's hopeless. I refuse to give up hope. I refuse to stop fighting. I refuse to simply shrug my shoulders and say, oh, well, I guess it's just going to be this way. You brave remnant, I am so honored to be working with you every single day. And I look forward very much to continuing this past this election, moving forward into 2021, 2022, 2023, and 2024, and onward from there. I am very, very, very excited about what this movement is going to look like, and I'm honored to be fighting with you. Guys, have a great rest of your night. God bless. Remember, I am Spike Cohen, and you are the power. God bless, guys.
They say about an eye for an eye in a time when the blind lead the blind. Who am I to deny I would cry when a loved one dies? I recognize that body outside with the holes in the body that was alive. Now confined to a chalk outline. Find out how, but you never know why. It ain't even make it to the news at 9. It ain't even make it to the news at 9. That's why